I'm Mike Coyle, and you're watching Inside Exploration. Today I'm here with Enrico Di Cesare, who is the VP of Research and Development, and Frank Dumas, who is the COO of St. George Eco Mining. The company can be found on the CSE under the ticker symbol SX and on the OTC under the ticker symbol SXOOF. Gentlemen, thanks for taking the time over the holidays to meet up with me.
It's a pleasure, and I'll start by saying happy, healthy, prosperous New Year to everybody out there.
Happy New Year to you guys as well. All right, gentlemen, let's jump right into it. 2022 was a big year for St. George Eco Mining. You basically went from a research and development company looking at entering the battery recycling space. You had a loose plan of how you wanted to achieve that and where you wanted to go. But I think things have drastically changed for the company in light of recent events. So let's start with that. You picked up a hell of a site, I got to say, Thorold multimodal complex with the BioVeld complex that's got all the hallmarks that you want to have to set up business. So talk to us a bit about that process and why Thorold.
Well, okay, I'll address that one. There's a lot of good sites out there. What we were looking for were sites that allowed us to continue growing. Bonuses if you had water, rail, gas, all of the variables. Thorold has that. There's a few other subtleties there. You have a 140 megawatt power plant, which means you're based on gas, which means you have steam. Among other things. Besides, they have about 1.2 million square feet of buildings, which is not to be overlooked, among other things. So there's a lot of synergy industries there. There's a lot of other locations like that across the continent and in Canada, and we'll be looking at all of those. So for those who we spoke to, that you think you were forgotten, no, it's just starting points, and we'll be talking to you.
So there's been a lot of activity down at Thorold with various companies like Char Industries and BioVeld kicking off and getting going. What connections have you made since entering Southern Ontario?
I'm going to be diplomatic here, because you have to understand that this was going quite fast while we're trying to place the equipment that was ordered in the right locations with the right buildings. The advantages of having biomass in the right form allow you to be green with your battery metals. Okay, and you'll hear that for all the sites that we're looking at. So I'm not promoting the Char, but Char allows you to have what I call the equivalent of green carbon units, which is part of our strategy, which we're going to get into in the interview, but I don't want to jump all over the place.
There's a few advantages also with the operators of the site. Now you have synergy. I think I've said that last year in the interview with Enrico. What kept me up at night was manpower and then battery allocation. Without getting too much into details, battery allocation is pretty much on track to be settled. And we're trying to keep up, in the sense that by us having these capacity, it's like the sausage factories, people are eating more sausage, you have to make more sausage. Because you're making more sausage, people will eat more sausage. Anyway, the same thing is happening here. We have partners that were refusing batteries because they couldn't move them. And now suddenly, they'll be able to move them to us. So that's going to be a big game changer, not just for us, but for the partners. Also, on the site itself in Thorold, the promoters of the site, or the operators of the site, including the port and the BioVeld people, they also have resource there. They have engineers, they have plant engineers, they have designers, they even have forklift operators. Now, we were in our list of things we needed to acquire. We had a certain amount of forklifts, we had a certain amount of operators that were what I hate the most, I could say, in this business, because they're standby people. You need them a few hours a week, and then the rest of the time, it's not much, that you can try to get them to do a dual type of position, but it's difficult. Now, what we realize with all these other partners around is that half of what we need to do, we can in partition, we can outsource to the local site, where we just need to coordinate with them if we need to get containers off a boat, containers off a train, pallets, and move inside the plant. They have the people to do that. So that right away allows us to pay a few hours a week instead of paying somebody full-time, and we don't have to maintain the equipment.
That's interesting. So this site is not just a site for you guys. It's actually a partnership where you're all going to be kind of working together to advance the multimodal hub, if I'm understanding correct.
Hopefully, we'll be able to leverage the site in that direction, and it should allows us to bring down the expected cost even more than what we had planned.
That's always a good thing. Okay, so guys, you signed a partnership agreement with Call to Recycle. I think this is really exciting because this is the base foundation. You're now, working with the largest battery collection company in North America. So that's a really good foot in the ground. But you're not limited to Call to Recycle. You can also outsource batteries. But talk to me a little bit about the partnership with Call to Recycle and how that all came together.
So, we've been working with Call to Recycle supplied batteries for part of our developments. What we hadn't realized is that we were actually ready to roll out. We were actually more advanced than we were giving ourselves credit for. Let's be clear. The opportunity is there, and we signed an MOU to process batteries, without going into details about the tonnages, because we have to perform too, right? But at the same time, we're going to be quite aggressive to perform and take the largest share as we move forward across Canada and USA. And I'm going to say USA because everybody forgets that part. But what we're looking at is the continent.
That's good to know. I like the approach. So your approach is going to be to focus on alkaline batteries. Why alkaline? Why not nickel cadmium? Why not follow your competitors and go down the lithium ion route?
Yeah, so I'll say something differently here. Alkaline is the largest quantity of household batteries collected today. So if we're going to complement our partners, we have to help them with that one. What we've ordered is the more complex equipment too, which is for lithium iron phosphate, nickel, and all those other ones. So don't neglect those, but that's a smaller percentage till what we call the EV market comes into play, right? Let's not forget that that's a little few years out. So we have to do our part with the batteries that are being collected in Canada. And if you're not doing your part with alkaline, then you're letting your partners down as well.
I would say probably, Mike, the element that people need to imagine is that you need to look at how it's being collected. Nobody's collecting rechargeable batteries only, or nickel cadmium only. They're collecting all the batteries and bins and Costco, Kansas Tire, these places. They're all going into that bin, and then you have to sort it out. And the alkaline is like the 90% of what's something in that range that's being collected. And the problem is, if you don't take care of that backlog, if you don't give capacity to Call to Recycle and the other participant in this market to clear that backlog, you're never going to get to the other 10% outside of, and that's an important part because that's interesting for us for the next 5 years, outside of the resource. I can call that a resource. I don't want to call it a reserve, but let's say the amount of battery in storage right now on the nickel cadmium side, because there's the backlog. There are also things that have been sorted out and stored but not processed, and we're coming handy with what we can do. Now, this is maybe a bit different when you get to the power tool batteries and stuff like that, because it's collected a bit differently. But still, to be able to increase the amount of batteries that we find extremely interesting for us, because they're going to be extremely profitable, we need to get rid of the batteries are a little bit less profitable. And that goes back to what we said also. We had discussion with the perceived competition in the past, and they also have a problem because they want to get to their lithium batteries. They want to get to the batteries with cobalt in it, which are profitable for their process. And they're stumbling in tonnage of black mass, of lithium phosphate and other type of batteries, which they're losing money on processing. Now that's where we come in, because we still can turn a profit on this. And that for us, that gives us critical mass. And we can make the extreme profit with the nickel, cadmium, and the other interesting batteries on the side.
I'm glad you touched on feedstock, Frank, because I was going to kind of delve into the numbers a little bit here. So looking at Ontario last year, Call to Recycle collected a little over 3,500 tons of alkaline batteries. So based on that, we know that your process can handle about, each unit can do what, 8,000 to 9,000 tons annually or per day. How you can break that down more finite for me, but
I'll cut you off on this and I'll answer the question you're asking right away. We don't need the equipment that we order to process what's going to come in. We can probably do up to 50,000 tons without using the equipment we have ordered. So
that was actually going to be a future question, but I'm glad you addressed that.
Within a few weeks, probably within a few weeks in January, we will be at a capacity of 50,000 tons, just with the equipment we already have, adding to it a few equipments that we had to order to, because we have certain environmental norms and labor norms to respect. But we're going to be able to operate all the alkaline battery in Ontario if ever we were to end up with all the alkaline batteries in Ontario, same Quebec, and we would be able to take a very big chunk of the overflow from the US also. Let's say if somebody was asking us to do it.
You're getting ahead of me.
If you look at the different types of batteries, and don't minimize the learning process that goes on to these things. When we started in January 2021, we talked about batteries. What we were focused on at the time was all the complicated ones without even thinking out what the percentages were, right? We thought about lithium iron phosphate because of the link with spodumene. We thought of nickel cadmium, again, because of our nickel resources. The strategy today includes optimization of transport, battery prep. The strategy today has a different technology for different types of batteries, which I think makes us a little bit more unique because we don't have one set approach. What we're doing is optimizing the whole process, logistics, each type of battery, what's the best way to process it, right? So when we talk about alkaline, which weren't even on the radar back then, and when we talk about our ability to handle that, there's two strategies for it. One is fertilizer, and the other is to make ferroalloys. Okay, overly simplistic. Yet you have to take a step back. We have multiple solutions for each type of battery, which is very unique. We didn't fall in love with one solution and tried to make it fit everything. We actually approached what sites do we need? Where's the populations? What type of batteries? What are we going to do with each type of battery? And then put a strategy. So we're pretty clear where we're going today, okay, compared to where we were when we started. And we didn't take only our ideas. So let's be very clear about that. We were open to multiple options. If someone had a better idea than us, let's hear it, right? And that's how we've evolved. And that helped us grow a strategy for North America, but also international. So, Western Europe is part of our strategy that we're going to copy what we're doing in North America. But if we didn't listen and talk, we would not have seen the opportunities in those locations as well.
Okay, I'm going to circle back to my original question here. Call to Recycle has a backlog of alkaline batteries, nickel cadmium batteries. So do you expect to be operating at capacity, or are we just going to get that 3.5 tons from call 2?
Yeah, we have to be diplomatic on this. We have to perform. We're staffing. Just because we picked the site, you don't have people trained and ready to roll immediately. What Frank alluded to about having 50,000 tons of capacity, 80,000 tons of capacity, Do we have to put it all in Thorold? The answer is no. We'll adapt, and that'll be an ongoing strategy with our partners. Our partners might very well say, okay, don't install all these lines over here. Let's put them over in some other location as well. Our strategy might include putting something in Europe. But where I will go with this is that we have sets of equipment now dedicated just for alkaline preparation. We have sets of equipment for all the complex batteries that people have trouble with to collect those black masses. So again, even in battery prep, we took a multiple effort approach, which is relatively unique to the industry as well.
Okay, that's good, because that kind of segues my next question. So Enrico, Frank, how are you different from your competitors? I know how you're different because you're focused on a lot of different things, but what is it specifically in your mind that you differentiates yourself from your competitors right now?
I'm going to say battery metals as the starting point, Mike, on that. So if we say battery metals, what's different, and you're going to hear a lot more of that even with our website and things like that, is that we're not only a battery recycler. You know, what we've done is we've come up with solutions to the resources of Canada. It's kind of disappointing if you're a Canadian to see resources going to China to be processed to make lithium hydroxide, for example. And we also have a solution for nickel. In nickel, we obviously, you're going to hear a lot more news about that, and Frank will talk to you about that. But we got nickel, of course, we've got cobalt, and we've got a lot of other precious metals. Where we're really unique is that as a battery metal company, we can do battery recycling, and we can do resources, and we can help people with their resources. We're not just looking for our own resources. What we have is a solution for people. When we talk about lithium, I'm going to be bold here and just say it. A lot of money's gone into Canada, and I'm going to say a lot of money's gone into the USA, and none of it is really that useful today. Okay. Maybe, just maybe, someone from outside the industry had to bring a new idea. The new idea is here and it works. I'm going to be even more bold and just let everybody know that WSP has been awarded the contract to do all the metallurgical simulations with all our improvements and size the future facility that can do lithium resources and batteries in one.
So
Okay,
has there been discussions? Sorry, has there been discussions with them, Enrico, then to kind of highlight your technology so that they're aware?
That's ongoing. That's ongoing. The mandate's been given.
Yeah. Yeah, the only thing I'm going to say is that the process is frozen now, and so we can do all of the equipment and things like that. You know, the mistake people make is when you don't freeze the process and you go and add equipment. There's a difference between battery preparation and hydro or pyrometallurgy, right? So with lithium, we're talking about hydrometallurgy. So let's be clear. You know, every reaction has to be accounted for, right? And even anything that goes in the air, exothermic and endothermic everything has to be accounted for to not mess up, right? So whenever you hear companies going, oh, wow, I didn't know that my budget was blown. Usually it's blown because you forgot some pieces, right? You can say whatever you want, but if you didn't do a proper metallurgical simulation, you will fail. We're doing that now with the frozen process.
I'll circle back to your question, and you're asking why we're different. I think you have to understand the end goal of the company, where we're actually going to become, what we want to become, and the path towards it. So right now you're asking the question, what Enrico answered you is pretty much how the path is different. The idea at the end is to be a commodity trader, is to be a critical mineral and battery mineral commodity traders, and to become pretty much unavoidable. And it sounds that if you look right now, there's the old way of doing business where you have all these offtake long-term agreement with car makers, battery makers, and it's difficult. And the negotiation are difficult. And when there's a shortage or when there's an issue, it's also difficult to just go on the spot market and try to get the metals. What we want to be able to do, and the process that's been developed within St. George, and that's the interesting part, the CapEx is being so low, the OPEX is so low, that we can run small operation in different locations. So instead of trying to do 30,000 tons of lithium hydroxide in one site close to a mine, and having $1.5 billion CapEx and big infrastructure, you can go at 50, 60 millions, have all these smaller plants, and just go into the niche of the, the variation in demand and cover that and accumulate on the side if need be, because you don't have to push the material out the door and sell it right away to justify or to answer your cash flow needs, to be able to maintain the massive 200, 400, 500 employees and big capex that you have to repay. It's lean and mean, and you can keep it going, and you're not forced to sell the metal. You can wait for that metal or for that commodity to be worth 50%, 100% more 6 months later, because you can afford it. And that's the beauty of what we want to be, is that we're going to have the recycling on one side and the processing for other people. But on top of all that, it's going to link all this is the commodity trading. It's the data. It's knowing who's going to need what commodity when, and when they're going to be willing to pay the most money for it. And that's the whole thing. It's when everything is going to be integrated, when we'll know, when we're going to have a guy like Enrico sitting on his computer in Montreal, knowing what's happening in Italy, knowing what's happening in Germany, in Brazil, in Iceland, and in Thorold, and so, okay, I know what I'm dealing with. I know what I can push to produce, and decide, okay, we're going to set aside X type of batteries for now. We know what's coming in 3 months. We know what kind of metals or commodity we're going to be able to sell for most money in 3 months. And this is what we're going to produce now. This is the next batch we're pushing through. And that's the beauty of this thing, that eventually, and market intelligence is going to be one of the big foundation of the company. Knowing what the market, the commodity market needs in 3 months and 6 months, and being sure that we're there with what they needs at that.
Well, it certainly sounds like you guys have changed your focus and direction over the last 6 to 8 months, and I really like where you're going with this. How does one go about financing all this, Frank? I mean, we're going to need some hydrometallurgy, some pyrometallurgy. You guys have some big plans for expansion. So you're the finance guy. You've pulled off some pretty impressive finances above market price. How are you going to go about this one?
Well, financing the resource in Quebec is not a big issue right now. Financing the metallurgy in Quebec and in Ontario is going to be less and less of an issue. And there's advantage, there's tax advantage, there's governmental program. And I think I'm never going to say it's easy. It's never easy. But it's also, it's less a science, more an art in raising money. That you need to be patient. And sometimes you need to basically put things on ice for 3 months, because you know that at one point somebody's going to need what you're doing. They're going to need to somebody that's going to check that box that they have to invest a certain amount of money in a certain type of R&D, and that's what we've done recently. Where we've said, okay, we've set aside and said no to certain grant program, knowing that there was a bigger price behind it, and we're going to keep doing that. And that somehow it might be frustrating for people that want quick results within 3 months, but the price at the key is worth it. And sometimes waiting a few months more, or waiting until all the planets are aligned and that the price is central, that's worth it. So in terms of that, metallurgy resource is not an issue. Iceland is a bit more complicated because you cannot use flow through or tax advantage, but there's also value in what we have in life, and there's other type of people on the continent. There's major companies that have signed an NDA to look at Iceland, and not one or two. We're over a dozen now. That tells you a lot about. I would say, in the top 10 companies, we probably have 7 under NDAs. And obviously one of them wanted to talk about Manicouagan, but all the other ones are looking at Iceland. We are at a very advantageous position in Iceland, where we can do joint ventures, we can do farming with these big players. As long as we're around, as long as we're the environmental custodial entity, I would say, and we're there making the bridge or the connection with the community, we'll be able to do good things there. So financing there could go, again, not easy, but not extremely difficult either. In terms of everything else, well, you're talking about equipment. There's program to fund staff with the government. That is fairly easy to finance. I would say easier to finance than resource. And then cash flow and these things, there's banks out there more than happy to see what our cash issues are and come and help and provide help for it. Especially when you get with, you show up at a bank with a loan guarantee from the government. So that's the type of things where I'm a lot more comfortable because it moves a lot quicker. And it's the same thing with Enrico, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but getting a loan guarantee that we know we can do what we want, and if things change and we can optimize the process, it doesn't cause an issue, is a lot more interesting than coming in with something in a box that's very limited in what we can do in terms of the scope of operation, and asking for a grant that might take a year to do.
Yeah, and I'm going to support Frank on this. Like, yeah, you put all the weight on Frank for the financing, but it's a team. What you have to do is have the right strategy for everything, right? The fact that we've broken it up into pieces now, as you heard, you know, there's battery prep. We have multiple types of battery prep. We have multiple types of battery critical metals recovery, and we have resources, right? So the fact is cash flow is king. So what you're going to do is you create pieces and cash flow, but because it's been broken into pieces, there's not a huge weight on one individual in a company. It's as a group, we'll execute the pieces, create cash flow, and the rest will follow. Okay, so we're not break or broke type thing because everything has to happen at once. We're actually doing it in a systematic way that's very logical and puts less risk for the shareholders and the organization.
Always like to hear that, gentlemen. Thank you very much for that. Okay, let's talk branding. You know, I've been out there arguing with people, trying to tell people, look, you can't rebrand your company and launch a website when you don't even have full direction of where you're going. But based on what we've been talking about this morning, I feel like you guys have direction. You know where you're going now. You've got the sites, you've got a plan. So now, when do we see that website? When do we see that rebranding effort come to fruition? It's been 6 months, and Brandenburg has to be held accountable for this. I mean, guys, come on. We want to see a rebranding. We're excited for this.
Well, before even Frank answers, I'm just going to say one thing, Mike. Again, it's a team. They have a role, but St. George has a role, and everybody has to do their piece. I'm going to let Frank answer, but you're right. The strategy today seems clear, focused, and precise. Is it different than when we started in 2021 talking about batteries? The answer is yes. So I'll let Frank answer now, but don't put all the pressure on one group.
I'm not. I'm saying it to both of you generally.
Yeah, no, but it's just.
I would say first, Mike, I don't know for Enrico, I don't want to talk for anybody else, but I'm personally very happy with what Brandenburg did. And we've been happily surprised. They had come up with a few scenarios, and we were able, like, there was no long discussion within management. We pretty much jumped on one of their scenarios and said, you nailed it. You nailed it, better than internally we were able to do it. And the reason for that is that they took us individually, they took us in small groups, and then they took us collectively into directed interview and drill down what we thought the company was. And obviously, you're going to take any companies and you're going to have the same issues. People in different departments, different segment of business will have a different global view of what the company is. And their job was to try to make sense of all of this. And there was something that was linking everything together. We knew, I think that Enrico knew, I knew, not everyone knew in the company. And not their fault. We're not the easiest necessarily to extract information from all the time. So they really did that job. And they came up with something that was, I would say, 95% the reality. And we had to just correct a little bit, and now they've done the branding is done. What if you're a gamer, you would call the skins of the website is done. How it's going to look and the feel of the website. But the beauty of what they've done is that they build a brand that's not the brand for St. George today. It's the brand for St. George in 5 years from now. It's the whole process and where we're heading. And people will be able to figure that out in a very simple and layman's way of understanding it, just by looking at the website. Like 2 minutes on the website, you can understand what we're doing, what's the end goal of what we're doing, and what needs to be done to get there. And I think that's the interesting part. They've done a fantastic job. Now, I'm not trying to avoid your question. I'm going to start to work on the website tomorrow with the group that, and they've started to work on it, but we're going to start internally to manage I would say, the structure itself, the database and these things. We're also this week starting to review ERP providers, so enterprise resource planning providers. We're looking at integrating all the softwares to do program and project management and having a dashboard. So when I said, like, when Enrico decided to open his laptop in Montreal, and he can have a global view, everything that happens, all the process he controls, and what is needed from him and what he needs from us is kind of transparent, where you can request for resource, request for help and budget, and we can plan ahead. So we're moving into the type of usually software platform that you'll see in Fortune 500 or Fortune 5,000. We're moving from the small cap we are to bigger data operation, and the website will be integrated with that, meaning that a lot of things will be shown on the website. If you dig into it, that will be real time and live data. So eventually down the road, we'll be able to see transparently how many batteries we're processing, for example, by the hour, and you'll know how much commodities we have in inventory and that type of things. So you'll be able to data mine the website and see what we're doing. Now, we've said before, we're never going to do financial projection, and some people don't like that, but I don't think it's something we should do, to hire an army of CPAs to basically come up with something that will always be an approximate. And taking away Enrico's time, my time, other people's time, to work on something that's fake, that's not going to be, unless we're extremely lucky, it's not going to be the reality. Because if you look at all these companies, they all underperform or overperform on these projections. And if you look at the amount of money they put behind it because of regulations to be able to do these projections, it makes no sense. It never made any sense for most companies, apart from banks and a few financial sector participants. But coming into our business, it makes no sense. It also is a way for us to show the competition where we're weak and where we're strong. And I think that it's not the best thing to do. Let them figure it out 3 months after the fact, when we cash the check, when we sign these contracts.
Yeah, I'm going to add to Frank's thing, which is, like, we talked about how we're compartmentalizing all the different facets, and we have a strategy for all of them. What you say today in one location, you might be making 10 times that in another location that you hadn't even thought of, because the growth is there, right? So where I'm going with this is that anybody who would want to put you in a box and prevent you from making 10 times the money at another location, no one will say, yeah, I'm in favor of that, even as a shareholder, right? So the point is we have a strategy. It's been compartmentalized in a way to be able to execute. It allows us growth at multiple sites, and we'll grow where we should grow for the best money. So overly simplistic, you can't put that in a box. Each location, we tend to be cash flow positive. A short term, we're hoping to be neutral, and we grow to cash positive. It's just real life, right? And then we roll out all the pieces. You have to be logical, you know? So don't assume Thorold is it. There's a lot more going on in the background, and we're looking at multiple locations. We have a headache to execute. You signed the lease, you got to put the equipment in, you got to get it working, you got to get a staff up to speed. All the things that Frank was mentioning, you're not going to be able to do that if your staff is not trained and up to speed, right? So you got to do that. You got to create the family type of approach, because you want to keep your people for the long term. And I'm saying this because we're going to be recruiting. So we're really trying to build a team, right? Not just, you know, check off things. Like we're really focused on execution now, okay, which is quite different than doing R&D.
I very much appreciate that. And that's why I'm really excited for 2023. I think this is a very big turning point for the company between the rebranding, the new site, the focus. I think you've done a really good job of kind of setting the table for the future. Okay, let's push off that stuff aside for a minute here, and let's, Frank, talk about Manicouagan. I'm freaking stoked, man. I don't know why the market's not picking up on this. You guys just hit another 7 meters of massive sulfides in 180 meter, over 180 meters or 240, whatever it was. Doesn't matter. You hit 7 friggin' meters of massive sulfides in the same system where you hit some really impressive grades. Frank, how excited are you about that? I can't hear you, Frank.
I was on mute. Yeah, so I'm excited. I've been excited about Manicouagan for the longest time. I'm more excited now because you always have that doubt. What if I'm wrong? What if, you know, it's interesting, but it's small, it's limited, it's localized. Now it starts to be fairly big. One of the mistakes we've made last year was to let the contracted geologists decide what would be sample and not. And because there was section that were so shiny, obviously, that's what they wanted to get sampled. And they let go a lot of the material last year that we resampled, we resent after. And to this day, we know also that historical stuff has been undersampled, where there is no visual mineralization in it, or very little, and you realize, okay, I might have 100 meters or very long, without saying 100 meters, could be more, by the way, but of low-grade nickel. And they think, okay, if it was by the 401 or, you know, close to other operations in Sudbury, you would say, okay, we have a nickel mine there at 0.25, at 0.2% nickel. You don't have that up high on Manicouagan. You need grades that are a little bit higher to start to say, and you need quantity. Obviously, it's still an economical mineral if the capex is already in place. You'll process that with everything else. But what we realize is that the PGEs don't necessarily go down because the nickel go down. And that's one thing that we missed last year. And it's one thing that historically they all missed before. Underestimating the PGEs, not caring about the PGEs, because obviously you're looking at premium, sometimes 4 times the cost of sending to the lab just for base metals and sending to get the PGEs sample. And especially with Manicouagan, where they had a cutoff that was so low, what we call the threshold, where if you get over a certain grade, they'll send it a second time for reassay. On some of the metals we had, we don't have blanks, not blanks, but we don't have standards. that are high enough. So the standards is usually what you provide to the lab, that you buy on the market, that you know what is the grade of that sample, so that you can do quality control from the lab. But you don't tell the lab that this is an actual, something not coming from your project. You mix it with everything else. It has a project number on the sample. They just process it, and you're able to figure out if there's an issue with the way they're doing it. Now, the problem we had is that it's quasi impossible to find to find material right now and to buy standards that have the grade as high as we have for certain type of precious metals or PGEs, like the rhodium, for example, they're in this system. It's same thing for osmium. We have grade of osmium that if they start to figure it out, they're gonna send everything for reassay, which is gonna triple the cost of everything. So first thing is we have to negotiate, and that was a heated discussion also with one of our suppliers. It's okay, we're gonna bring up all the threshold. You don't resend automatically a second time because we hit half a gram of rhodium, for example. I know that's what they do in the industry often, but we cannot do that for Manicouagan. Too often it comes higher than that, and we should just get the results and move on, because otherwise it delays everything by 3 months, sometimes 6 months. And one of the things, like I said, is that often when the nickel tends to go down, the PGs don't go down as fast. Like the curve is different. So when you see these large, massive, very disseminated low sulfide zone with 0.1 to 0.3 nickel, you might have a few grams of PG per ton in all of these large sections, and that's everywhere. We have a lot of these holes that are outside of the corridor, in the envelope of that corridor, that are very interesting to look at. So, Manicouagan, just because we know that we have something there, there's a discovery. We said it last year. We're confirming it now. If you talk to Herb is less conservative than he used to be on it. Actually, he's still conservative, but he's more enthusiastic. He let go a little bit more. You see the excitement when he talks about it. And in my case, I'm becoming more conservative because it's real. It's not promotional. We have something there, and it's how we're gonna, beat the credibility deficit, I would say, that any junior company has, because we're all promoters. Every junior company is a promoter. Every junior company goes with the dream of finding something that can be put in production. And when we realize, okay, now we might have something that we can put in production, you need to bridge that gap between you and the major, between you and the producer. And there's a change in the lingo or in the language being used, and in how you're supposed to explain what you have. So one of the things, for example, we add, because it's good practice, it was material, we had to explain that we got 7 meters or 6 point something meters of massive sulfide. We're probably going to put some release also, saying of what other type of discovery we have when we move to the downhole geophysics in a week from now. So you'll start to get 3D rendering of the mineralized zone. It's been extended right now. At least we don't know if it carries metals. We have a doubt. We have an XRF on site, but
Come on.
but we're not going to go out and say it.
No,
and
you can't. I get that.
Another company do it, and it's touchy because you can create a massive promo around the price of your shares, and then you realize, oh, a lot of it is it's iron, for example, or it's other type of mineral, or it's sterile. It's sterile sulfide, and it exists. It's there. It's in the system, and sometimes it crisscross the other type of sulfide. So you have to be careful. And even if you know that your XRF gave very good results, very high grade, I always question the representativity of the sample itself.
Yeah,
because the XRF is going to pinpoint 1 square millimeter on the core. And unless you do like other companies have done close to us, close to the Manicouagan site, and create a representative sample at their core shack by crushing it, mixing it, and then creating like a small section in which they take a few readings with XRF, then you start to get something that's closer to reality. But you don't have blanks, you don't have standards. When you do that, unless you do it to the standards also, this is not something that we're comfortable to just put out. But we'll say one thing though, we'll put out mineralized bodies. And now in terms of the mineralized body, this has been extended a few folds. We're looking at something that's a lot larger than it was. And that's just with a little bit short of 1900 meters, we were able to squeeze this fall. We're going back there end of February, early March, and probably we're going to put another 10,000 meters if we're able to do it. So
wow, you just covered my next question. I was going to ask you what your plan was for drilling for the rest of the year, but that's very encouraging to hear. You're putting 10,000 meters in there.
Yeah. That's not the rest of the year. That's going to be just the spring. And we'll see what we do also. So that's just the corridor for now, because we have other zones that we want to go at, but we don't know enough we don't know the surface enough. There's a 3,000 to 4,000 meters, sorry, 3,000 to 4,000 kilometers of airborne geophysics, of lines of geophysics that will be done at 100 meter spacing. We're also coming in with a section that's around the corridor and another, I would say, secondary corridor that we seem to have identified that we want to do at 25 meters of spacing. So there's that. Plus there's the down-hole geophysics that should do a few holes that were drilled last year and this year, and will allow us to start to develop a 3D model of where the conductive mineralization is. And that's going to give us probably enough by June, end of June, to start to look at compiling a maiden resource system. If everything goes right, obviously.
Perfect.
And then,
go ahead.
I think it's basically like Enrico was saying, at one point you have to freeze the process. So at one point you have to say, okay, we're going to take all the data we have now, we're going to create a resource system. Even if we know, as we're doing it, that it's now, you know, it's been probably increased by twofold, threefold. At least we'll have that and that base that we can say, okay, this is what it is as per that date, and now we're moving forward to increase that every year or every 2 years.
So Enrico, on that note, I'll get your take on this too. Let's talk about some met work and mineralogy of this forming deposit. Have you done any work on it?
Yeah, so samples are coming in January, and we're going to start the metallurgy on that. And what you heard from Frank talking about the different grades and iron and things, sometimes it's less sexy for people. But, you know, if you have to move a piece of rock to get to the rock you want, how do you turn that into money too? So that's part of the metallurgy to support the geological work. But what you heard, and I'm going to put it into layman dummy terms, is that even the less exciting rock is still exciting, and you have to move it anyways. So the metallurgy is going to be to support the geology. What products can you make? Because you have to move those rocks anyways. I don't care if it's an iron concentrate. I don't care if it's the PGEs, nickel, copper, et cetera, et cetera. What will you make? And that'll be going on in parallel, which will help to optimize what you call a resource. When you're looking at the 3D modeling and things, the next stage is going to be how much rock you have to move, you know, for your modeling to get to the choice sections, and can you turn the less viable things into money. So that's part of the whole big strategy. But what you're hearing is even the less exciting stuff might actually be really exciting too. So that's the message that you should take out of Manicouagan.
Hey, you don't need to sell me on the low grade nickel. I work with another company who's having fantastic success in the met work that they're doing with their lower grade nickel. Low grade nickel is very comparable to low grade copper deposits, and I think that's becoming more and more common knowledge these days as projects like this are advancing, because the world is in extreme demand for nickel, and clean nickel at that. And nickel sulfides, low grade nickel sulfide deposits, kind of offer a greener solution when it comes down to it. Okay, great. Let's talk about Iceland. You had some geothermal work going on there. You're going to be testing those sediments, or you are testing those sediments. Where are we at with that? I'm pretty excited about the opportunity there.
So we've received sediments. We'll be testing them. There's some radioactive elements in there, so we're gonna prep the technicians with that. Not that we're worried about it, because they've been sitting around for a long time. They're no longer where they were. But when new samples come in, you might as well take the right approach and have everybody work with the right way. I'm very intrigued, and which is me being diplomatically low key, but I'm very interested in these sediments that come from these geothermal. I'm expecting some very interesting results as we progress in that.
Frank, is there anything else going on in Iceland that you want to talk about before I move into another subject?
Without extending too much, there is some area that outside of the Thor project that will suddenly become very important for the company. I cannot expand too much on this, but you should hear.
I'm listening.
For the next few months. A lot of it has to do not with what's there. We know what's there by now. We've known for a few months. It's really to get all the ducks in a row with the government and with the locals, so that we don't end up announcing something that turns out to be blocked by the locals because we didn't involve them. Iceland is extremely picky. It's probably the way that it should be also in Canada with the First Nation, is to involve people in the community from the start, from the first few acts that you do in exploration. So that's one thing. The second thing is on Thor. We're planning to do some drilling over there. There's some work and compilation being done. We're coming up with a model. It might be a bit different of what we're used to have. The model we had was inherited from the other company that had done some work on it historically. And we might have realized that it's a bit different than what we thought. And not negative, not in any negative way. It is like very interesting, and we might get something going there. Keep in mind that one project has a lot of suitors already, a lot of potential partners from the majors so far, mostly tire kicking, but it's still interesting. So one's going to have to pull the trigger at one. So that's for Iceland. I think for us, the reason why we were in Iceland, why St. George moving to Iceland from the start, and we've tried to get there for 15 years. It was the metallurgy, it was the sediment out of the geothermal wells. And I think that's going to be the big story for us at the very least. For St. George, Canada, what's going to come, where our interest is, you can call us and say, well, we found 100 grams of gold. We're going to say, okay, thank you and congratulations. But what really gets us excited is the material that comes out of the wells.
Interesting. I'm going to be following along for developments on that one. I like what you said and alluded to there. Okay, gentlemen, H2SX. This is another very large working part of St. George's future. You know, there's been talks of where you're going to set it up. Now that Thorold is in the mix, though, could we potentially see an EVS or an H2SX, EVSX kind of joint venture operating in the same facility, or do you think that H2SX will stick with Quebec?
No, they won't stick with Quebec, but I'll say one thing. This is the energy sector. So it's adjacent to what we do. But the energy sectors, things can move very fast, and the rug can be pulled out from under you very quickly. As soon as we have one plant operating, I don't know if we'll be able to actually open to this company, or we'll have to sell it or spin it out. Just because of the players that are already in discussion. We have majors already, major energy producers, and major green energy producers. Do not exclude the legacy energy producers they're in the mix. They're talking to us. We're in a situation where we had worked to get biogas to be able to convert biogas into hydrogen and carbon. And these energy producers end up figuring out that we got our hands on allocation of biogas, which they want to reduce their carbon emission. And they're willing to say, okay, why don't you take our other legacy gas? We'll cut you a deal. We'll invest with you so that you reduce that and you leave the biogas for us. And we somehow doubled it to make everybody happy. So there's a lot of moving parts and moving very quickly. The Quebec government and that the minister said that in an interview, so I can actually report on it, or I can disclose it. We do have confidential agreement with the government, Quebec government, right, and the Canadian government that I cannot talk about. But the Quebec government's been clear, the minister's been clear. Every dollar is going to be invested, they're going to be there for $1. So if you look at the cost of this project, that's $50 to $60 million in Saint-Hyacinthe. Government's going to be there.
Excellent. All right.
So I'm just going to throw one thing at you, Mike, that you asked. You know, I mean, I think if people forget that H2SX makes hydrogen, but if you do carbon capture, like battery grade carbon, that fits with battery metals, right? If you do carbon capture and you can use that carbon another time, then you're also greener as well, because you're still reducing the full total CO2 footprint. So H2SX fits the big strategy in multiple ways. And it'll have a growth of its own, as Frank indicated, but it also fits strategically with the battery metals focus.
The company is going to be a battery grade graphite or battery grade carbon producer. And that's going to start very quickly. We might be in front of a lot of graphite projects that are planned or expect to go into production. And it's going to be all by green source, all via urban mining. So that's one element that could surprise people. It's a lot of moving part, I would say. They're into a sector also that you need to, you cannot steamroll, because you have to have the support of the locals and the local communities. They could quickly put a stick in your spoke if you try to push this too fast. But again, it's the same situation. You're going to get to a point where it's going to be either the critical mass or the breaking point. We're going to have a slurry of announcements to make. And right now, that's what's starting to, the momentum is there. That's what's starting to line up. And you're going to have at one point, and I cannot tell you, I'll give you no timelines. That's the last thing. And again, I get all these texts and these emails, Enrico also, about all these timelines. We're getting pressure by shareholders, stakeholders, asking when you're going to do this. I'll tell you, we don't know. It's, when it's ready, we'll say it's ready. And when it's optimal for us to roll out things, we'll explain and we'll put press release and disclosure like we're rolling out things. Right now, a lot of it is tragic. A lot of it needs to stay confidential because it's, if we were trying to explain the plan, people will actually probably put, I would say, try to put hurdles in front.
You don't need hurdles right now. Okay, in light of what you just said, you don't want to give too much guidance. You don't want to give any hard deadlines or anything, but we're rolling into 2023. There's a few things on your table that are moving forward. Obviously, we could probably expect some results from Manicouagan sometime in the spring. Obviously, you're setting up at Thorold and trying to get some equipment in there and get processing batteries. But what can we expect for the first quarter of 2023 for St. George?
I'll say right away. Yeah, I don't know when we're going to get the Manicouagan results. Okay. I have an idea that we might get the geophysical results first, because they're the quickest to interpret and to compile. When all the material will be with the lab and how fast the lab can move us, I personally won't even have an idea before probably the third week of January, just because it's vacation time right now. They're going to get there, they're going to tell us, and then we'll have an idea. I don't think it's going to go faster. I'm very conservative on this. I don't think it's going to go faster than last year. We've done everything right last year. It's been very long. The only difference is we might be able to convince them to raise the thresholds so that when we hit 1% nickel or 10 ppm, 10,000 ppm of nickel, they're not going to send it back. We might be able to raise that to 15 or to 15,000 ppm or 1.5% nickel, and that will get all the results below. But still, people want to know where we have the 3, 4, 5, or 9% nickel. So we're still going to get pressure from people saying, why do you wait this long to disclose the best results? Well, because there's a process. So I'll say, don't expect any results from Manicouagan outside of the geophysics before probably, I would say June, July, maybe for later than that. If it comes better than quicker than that, it's perfect. I'll be very happy, but I won't be disappointed if it's not before the end of June. The first thing, in terms of the batteries, I think we will be we'll be processing batteries in the first quarter, but we're not going to disclose anything else that we turn the key into the system. We'll tell you later what the results are, because I think we're going to have disappointing weeks. We're going to have fantastic weeks. I think we'll balance out, but the first quarter is not going to be representative of what we'll be doing in a year from now, when we'll be reaching our cruising speed for this, and or cruising pace. I'll let Enrico answer the rest, but I think you need to touch the lithium productions, because that's one thing that might be there very quickly.
Yeah. So I'll just add one thing to Frank on the batteries, is that by June, I expect that we'll have enough capacity to handle all of Canada's batteries that are being collected at Thorold, which will exceed what we need. Which means that we probably have ordered too much equipment, which lets you all realize that we're going to be allocating it in other locations strategically. That'll follow the same model as Thorold. Okay. When we get back to lithium, I know, Mike, you're going to ask me about alumina, and you're going to ask about all these other things that we've talked about. I'm just going to say it differently. Go look up the chemical formula of spodumene, and you'll see it's LiAl brackets SO32. Okay, so is it that surprising that alumina is being collected with our process? The right question is, why has no one thought of it before? And it's because we're still working with a lot of older processes that didn't work out. And I'm going to be bold about it and say it. Sometimes you have to take a step back and relook at it. We were fortunate that we started after everybody else. So when we looked at it, we said, okay, what is everybody doing? We looked at brines, we looked at what people did with spodumines. We tested all the different types of common acids. I'm going to say common again. And then we went outside the box, which has allowed us to collect the alumina as high purity. The silica comes out as a byproduct. After being washed, it can be thrown into asphalt. So our approach is green, no waste, and on top of that, a fertilizer. Okay, now
go ahead.
Yeah, so I was going to say, go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, I have a small delay here with the distance, but I'll say we will have to touch, and you'll have to ask about Iconic, otherwise people will crucify you.
Yeah, it's coming.
Okay, so I didn't know it was coming. I'll say on Iconic one thing. We had in our hands a draft of our report. We have certain things that we need to add to it. In your first quarter type of announcement and results, expect some filings for patents in regard to the process that's been fantastically improved. There is, first, in terms of the costs have been decreased. We were already probably one of the lowest processing method out there in terms of OPEX. Now it's going to be by, light years. And it reduced our costs, it reduced a lot of difficulties we had with what was required for the process. And also opened the door to do a lot more things with with the different materials that we're not interested in. Now, that means that it will make processed, and we thought could be economical with Iconic up to, I would say, September, October, before we stumble upon the discovery into something that will definitely work, definitely be economic. And
Hold on. Okay, you give me all kinds of excitement and jitters here. I know this has been a big challenge for you guys, classifying that material down to a workable concentrate. I mean, the metallurgy is fantastic. We've already known that. I know there was the addition of the alumina coming into solution with the lithium, which is fantastic. I don't know what this breakthrough is that you're speaking about, but I really like the prospects of it. Does it have anything to do with the boron that's included in their latest drilling?
No, absolutely nothing to do with it. Although that borons definitely are looking at samples from them that we will integrate and figure out a way to actually, because it's a valuable mineral. There's a demand for it. There's a demand for U.S. production of boron. Keep in mind, we got also boron at our Notre Dame project that we disclosed. We might get some higher grade section, but the element there that's important is that you need to let us follow the patents, and then we'll disclose. So we cannot really tell you, apart from it something that's, I would say, we can call it, I don't know, Enrico, if you like the term, but I would say it's disruptive. It is disruptive for the industry, what we discovered. And it's the equivalent of all the path that we traveled since 2017 is being trumped by that. Like, this is another step that make this process even more valuable.
Yeah, so the only thing I'm going to add to that is, we talked about spodumene, and in real life there is no perfect crystal spodumene in any resource, right? So you can go from clays to hard rocks. You're going to have impurities and things. In a perfect world, that would have been easy, right? You get your alumina, you get your lithium, you get stuff that goes to sand or the asphalt producer, for example. In real life, you have impurities in there. And what this process does is it allows a little bit more flexibility with processes that or resources that have impurities that have hampered other people. And the angle with fertilizer and the angle of the full cycle allows us to do things that others don't do. The other part that's quite interesting, if you look at the Canadian resources, you've always heard of multi-billion-dollar projects, billion here, billion there for these types of projects. And it's not just the mine. We're just talking mine is blasting, crushing, grinding, flotation, right? That's your spodumene. There's no way you get to $1 billion with that, right? But what happens is all the purification stages. And what we've done here is quite compact, lower energy, a little bit more flexible, forgiving for some contaminants that others can't be forgiven on, or it costs them a lot. So lowest total chemical consumption, lowest energy. That's the message you have to have going out there.
And time-wise, and your process is faster. You're not applying heat, you're not applying pressure, you're recovering acids, and it happens very quickly. You can put that into solution in under 5 minutes. As where typical brines, you have to let them evaporate in large ponds for days and days at a time before you can collect your lithium. Cool, awesome. That's really exciting. I didn't expect that answer, so super good. Can't wait to see that report. Now, will you guys be publishing the report, or will that be at the discretion of Iconic?
It's going to be at the discretion of Iconic. Okay. First thing is, we have a draft of the report. We're going to integrate the new findings into it. We have some additional tests to run, and then we're sending it to a third party. That report needs to be 4301 under the National Instrument norms, and that's not going to be done internally. So basically, the process is Enrico and his team will do the process for the independent firm, and then we'll vacate the premises pretty much and let them reproduce it to confirm that this thing works and works the way we're saying it works. So all the econometrics that we're going to provide to Iconics, then they'll be able to use it in whatever type of a study and report that they need or they're required to do. I will assume that we can probably move this, send our own report to Iconic sometimes in the first quarter. I would say probably by the end of January, mid-February. And then with the new, yeah, I do hope, like, it's not a fixed thing. We'll see how the labs, reacts, and the people at the lab reacts with us, and how quick they can move things when they come back next week. But after that's done, we send a report. We agreed on a third-party engineering firms or metallurgical firms to do the review, and that's going to follow its course. So it's a matter, there'll be some disclosure, but in terms of that independent report done by a third party, I have no idea how long that process is going to take. Hopefully, we'll be able to finish this in 2023, and I'll be able to use it and integrate it. But that's something that suddenly you involve 4 or 5 partners plus an independent firm, only some back and forth with a few people that will increase the timeline delivering that.
Okay, so this advancement, I know we've gone a little longer than you probably wanted to. I'm sorry, I love asking you guys questions. So this breakthrough that you've hit, does this apply to hard rock as well?
Yeah, principally, yeah. Like, just keep in mind that whatever we were doing, we would do with hard rock, and we would do with other types of materials, the ranges, and also with batteries. Okay, so lithium iron phosphate, and it works the same way. That's what's beautiful about it. I'm going to say something that a lot of people aren't aware of, is that the spodumene in Canada, after they're concentrated, a lot of it is going to China today. And as Canadians and as North Americans, with the whole cycle going towards electric vehicles and all that, and the importance of lithium, maybe, just maybe, that's really wrong. Okay, and maybe we should be processing it locally here, and that includes Ontario and Quebec. Now, to get to China from Ontario is even way worse, because you got to go through the canals to get to the St. Lawrence Seaway. So just think that out loud and say how wrong that is, when we're setting up in Thorold, okay, for Ontario, and for Quebec. You've gone down a path for a long time now. Maybe, just maybe, you have to take a step back and relook at it, and the solution might be right in front of you.
You've got the solution, and you've said that you've had the solution.
Yeah, I know, but outsiders don't know that. Now I'm being really bold and just saying the solution's there. Take the time to find out, because you guys are going down the wrong path by sending it to China. I have nothing against China. I'm just saying locally we should be processing.
And so why aren't we? Like, what's not that, not why aren't we? We know why not, because there is no viable solution. But I mean, can you not outsource spodumene concentrate? I know you tried, or you were going to outsource some spodumene. So where are we at with that?
Well, I'll say it differently. I think what we've done it really well in Canada is to encourage geological work. But R&D is being attached to geology versus R&D being done separately that could be reapplied to any resource. Okay, and funds are more easily accessible if it's attached to a geological formation. In some cases, the geological formation doesn't make sense. It's not a critique against any individual. It's just the reality of it, and the process makes sense, and vice versa. The geological formation makes sense, but the R&D that goes with it doesn't make sense, right? That's something we're going to have to improve on as a country. And it's not a critique. It's just we're all a product of our human nature, and we go with what we know, and we repeat it. So that's been a gap on lithium, okay? Because people look at the geological formation as if it's attached to technology, versus saying, where's the technological solution? And the opposite. You have a technological solution, you're worth nothing if you don't have a resource. That makes no sense either. So that's the kind of mindset that we have to eliminate or address in Canada.
Okay. Hopefully we hear a little bit more news on the spodumene front, because I've always been quite bullish about that whole side of St. George. Guys, I know it's been a long time. Let's wrap this up here. So is there anything that we haven't talked about that you would like to highlight at the end of this interview? I'll start with Enrico and then I'll let Frank wrap it up. Go ahead.
Well, I think what I would remind people, I think I've said it a few times, is that the uniqueness is to be able to tie resources with batteries and battery metals. And that's what I think really makes us unique. We have resources, we have batteries, we have technologies for battery metals, and I'll leave it at that.
Frank? Your mic's on.
No, I think that we covered enough of what we can disclose. There's a lot. I've saw people, or I've received message from people. People are sharing the board, and sometimes they send me snapshots. Try to stay away because it could be frustrating sometimes, because we know where we're going and we cannot explain that to people often for tragic reason. And you see people not understanding it, or they don't want to understand it because they would like us to do it in a certain way. We'll just bring the stock price up, a few folds, and they understand that it's not sustainable unless we build a company on there. Or if they do, they don't seem to feel the need to make sense all the time about it. I'd say that we cover pretty much everything. There is a lot of irons in the fire. There's a lot more things we're going to start to talk about that you've not heard about, that still ties in with everything else we're doing. And I think it's going to be a lot easier to explain who we are in the next quarter. As the website comes up, as the branding comes up, as we go to different conference, we start to participate as as speakers. People will start to see what we're doing, and the fact that we're going to have revenue. Maybe that's one element that's important. We're going to be revenue positive in the next quarter, and that's a big change for the company. We might not see another financing at 41 cents. So that we'll see how things goes, but I'm very encouraged by what I know we're going to have between now and the end of March.
Lovely. And I'm really glad you touched on the conferences that you're going to be going to. That was something I meant to ask you about, was marketing efforts, but clearly with the rebranding done, website up, you have a place for people to go to. You're going to start attending some conferences. My understanding is, Enrico, you're doing one in May that's already booked. To expand your reach, what is your plan? Just quickly, I'm sorry, I'm backtracking a bit here.
Well, we'll go to the conferences that make sense, because we're ready now to have that flag. And the way conferences work, I don't want to create expectations. Conferences is more, we exist, we're real, we're there. You don't actually make the real deals there. You might make some new friends and things, but you have to be present for people to take you seriously. Yes. Unfortunately, that's the way it works. The illusion, though, is you go to the conference to make the deals, which is just to catch up with people you're working with. Maybe have a drink.
It's a lot easier also to market the company after we have an hard launch, with a ribbon cutting, with a premiere of Ontario or things like that, when all the new equipment is not only there, but it's also working. You can see the whole process, and we can bring TV crew to do extended report on how things is working, how different it is, how interesting it is, and what it represents as a solution for the environment. And that is going to by itself help a lot. And we're going to push it. So we'll put money behind it and a resource behind it to push the marketing. But you don't do that when you're also struggling to get enough resource to just get to that, because it defies the purpose. But we're getting there now.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for taking the time out of your holidays to sit down with me. Again, this is Enrico Di Cesare. He is the VP of Research and Development for St. George, and Frank Duma, the COO of the company. Again, you could find the company listed on the CSE under SX and the OTC under SXOOF. Thank you guys so much for joining me again. If you like the content in this video, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we look forward to providing more great content on the next one. Cheers.